But what happened is that a few years later, we're talking about 3-4 years, I woke up one day and I realized I had no faith. I had nothing. I had no love for this deen. And I knew exactly why it was. It was because of this piece of fabric that I had on my head. And it was the cause of it. So I didn't know what to do. I'm like, I know exactly why this is happening. And I went to the Quran, and it had that verse, as long as there's no compulsion upon you, and whatever. And I had nothing. Like I said, the Quran is my only guide. So I said, okay, I'm going to take it off. And I took it off after college. And this is when I was meeting my husband. At least I got married afterwards, had that protection, right? But I told him, I'm like, I'm working through this. Even when we met like around that time. And I said, I don't know if I can keep this on. I already knew in my heart of hearts that this was the reason, the hijab was the reason why I was having so many struggles. I was a minority on top of minorities. I was Black. I was in an engineering college in which I was the only one Black woman as well as a hijabi. And I felt like a second-class citizen. I felt it went down in my soul. The world saw me as not good enough. And I saw myself as not good enough, only because of a fabric on my head. And I realized that there was something a lot deeper and a lot bigger of an issue. And I picked my faith over the meats. That's what ended up happening. But because I understood rulings, or just that verse on its own, right? Like the Quran is for regular people. I put in place certain rules in order to make sure that I didn't fall off. Because the problem with hijab, and I think why a lot of women who do take it off, is that it's a keystone habit. It's that one thing that was anchoring you down, and it spoke for you, and that's the beauty of it, right? So you don't go to that place, you don't do these bad things because you have the hijab on. There's this internal consciousness that happens when you put on the hijab. So I knew that that might be an issue that comes up, right? Like now I'm going out into the real world, I'm getting a job, and would I keep up with my deen because I don't have the hijab? So I had to walk a thin line, and that's really, you have to stay within the rules because the rules work, or when you create your own rules, it's really important that you adhere to the rules as much as possible. So what I would do is like make istighfar. I'd work more on my prayers. I would go to classes. I would learn more. I didn't intend on leaving it 100%, but I wasn't in the right place internally, and until I built myself up and came back to the law, I wasn't ready. Even when I was working and taking my Islamic thought classes, I was not wearing the hijab. I was looking at pictures. I was like, I wasn't. Because why? The system in which I was living in, the job that I had, it just wasn't that. And I was not going to feel like a second-class citizen. I'm sorry, I can't do it. And learning about Maqasid al-Sharia was very important to me because you're not supposed to be one. Preservation of wealth is an important one. Why do women not want to wear the hijab? Because they can't get a job. Their education is useless. They have student loans. Preservation of wealth. And that was not being upheld with the current system that was in place. Another one is preservation of lineage. A lot of women don't wear the hijab because they don't want to be taught of as too religious or not religious enough. So when they're trying to get married, I know I have a family member who put on both her with a hijab on and not because she didn't know whether to put it on or not. But in Muslim societies, it's not a question. It's literally like, are you wearing a shirt? Are you wearing socks? I mean, more like, are you wearing underwear? Like, it's an essential part of who you are. And you wear it. There is no debate of whether you're a religious person or not. That's not a thing when you leave America. It's a new thing that we have created as a society, right? A woman has the right to wear hijab, but we have put so much weight on it, a lot of weight on it, that is crippling for women, and that's their lives. So we talked about preservation of deen, faith, lineage, and wealth. The one thing that's missing is the preservation of mind. And that's what happened to me. I literally felt like a second-class citizen. And my mind, I was not okay. Mentally, I was so paranoid of going outside. I was scared, and all of these things that I heard on the news. Again, remember, post 9/11, how many times did we have to say, not in my religion, not in my religion? This causes trauma. This is not, no, you being an outsider just because of a piece of fabric is a huge thing, while your male counterpart doesn't have to think twice about this, right? So the reason I was telling you all of this stuff is so that you can understand how complex it is. This is really complicated because of the system. And the problem is, it's about habit systems. Your habits function within a system that's currently there. It functions within the community, within your family, within the greater country, within the nation. Globalization is a huge thing. One part of the world has to deal with what the other side of the world is doing politically. Islamic history also, if you look into it. For instance, the problems we're having in Gaza is because of how the UK and the Britain, European countries decided to divide up the countries. If the Ottoman Empire and the House of Saudi weren't really, it's a lot, and we're going to talk about this somewhere else. But it starts somewhere and it trickles down, and we are dealing with the trickling down right now. So we have to understand the system, and I hope what I said helped you understand and zoom out so that you're not blaming yourself too much, but more importantly, so that you can be proactive, right? You need to understand it's more complicated. You know it's more complicated. I knew it was more complicated, but no scholar was explaining that to me. Everybody, every time we talked about hijab, was like, put it on, sister, the Quran says so. You know, like that's all we hear, but we don't understand the nuances. It is a completely different world. Allah cares about your preservation of your mind, your deen, all of that stuff. He cares about that. He cares about that, okay? But we are told to put that aside for Allah. But why it is a necessity in Maqasid al-Sharia is because it's a requirement. In order to have a successful and thriving community and person, those preservations have to happen. It is essential. Now, do we give up? Right? That's the question. So the system is not doing what it's supposed to do. And I think this is where people don't circle back to what needs to happen. We get a little bit too liberal and we don't circle back. It's our job to fix the system. And the one story that I love is how Muslim women got together post 9/11 and said, hey, not my hijab. Don't touch that. So one woman in her community said, this is important to me, this is important to me, this is important to me. And collectively, they came up with something called World Hijab Day. That was the one day I felt like an outsider for once, you know? They feel like an outsider every single day. I was like, Nafs, ego, deal with it, you know? Like they felt like an outsider, but they created a day for themselves. But it was a collective. It was one woman, her habits, collectively with other women, who brought it back to Allah. So that's what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to succumb to the systems. We kind of, you know, maybe we're a little bit flexible, but we are supposed to. Our life goal is to come back to the law of Allah because that is justice, right? If you believe, if you are a true believer, it's not like believe or not. Truth is truth and falsehood is falsehood in the sense of justice is justice and injustice is injustice. That's just what it is. We don't bend to how the system functions, but the system impacts us. So whatever, you know, in my case, I did what I needed to do. And I think it was a flaw of the system in which I was raised in. Right? Mubin is a very important part of da'wah in the sense that it has to be clear and ambiguous. And then on top of that, it has to be publicly proclaimed. But the way that our religion, right, I remember like how did they just messed up the Prophet ﷺ for me? Right? Like Misquoting Muhammad by Jonathan Brown, great book if you want to read it, but they messed it up. So it's not clear. Like we are so confused. You know, so it's not, you know, some people say, you know, during the end of days, like maybe we are there because this is a very odd world. We had communities, we had support, we had all of that stuff. We don't have that. We're like fish out of water. That's where we're at. The whole thing is you come back to Allah. You keep coming back. You don't fall. These rules are there to protect you. That's what I learned. It's about love. The first thing, you know, we have Islam, and realize you are a Muslim even if you wear the hijab or not. Hijab is not the 5 pillars. But then after that, you go into Iman, and that is where the book of Allah, and this is where, you know, dissecting and negating the Quran and the verses about hijab, like we don't do that. If you believe in it, you don't do that. But the last step is ihsan. The rest of your life is about being excellent, not perfection. This is not a concept that we have in Islam. We need to stop with this. What we have is ihsan, and that means excellence. No matter how many times you fall down, you get back up. You keep trying, you don't give up. But shaitan and your nafs and stuff like that is like, let me just take it away. You know, I don't need this right now. But we're supposed to be working our lives to bring back to justice and to what's right. A woman has a right to not be naked out in the public, okay? Not even that, but to not be harassed. Like the 2 requirements, not to be harassed and to be seen as an honorable woman. That is the purpose of hijab. So if we understood all that together, we zoomed out, then it would be a lot better. So in essence, that's exactly what I did. I worked on it little by little. I worked on my mind, and that's where I studied Islamic thought. Number 2, I worked on my finances. I married an amazing man. Now I'm a stay-at-home mom of 2 kids. I don't have to deal with financial issues. And I really wanted to point this out, is that the men are a very essential part. Rijalul qawamun, okay? These women have supportive men behind them. I didn't have that, so I married one. You know, he'd look at me, he's like, oh, you look so beautiful in hijab. Imagine hearing that. You know, it impacts your heart. It makes you feel safe. And that's important. You want to feel safe. Preservation of life. You want to feel safe. And your mind is also, it's impacting your preservation of the mind. And a man is allowing for my preservation of my wealth as well. Right? I worked, and now I can work in the way that I want instead of succumbing to the man. Right? To the man, the woman, whatever, the industry, right? Like I don't have to look a certain way because it It's in my control right now. So another thing, preservation of deen, I worked on my deen. I studied Islamic thought for 2 years. I continue to engage with the Quran regularly. I work on my faith, all of that stuff. I do a lot of inner work. Another one is preservation of lineage. I got married, and I told him, I went up to my husband and I said, look, I don't know if I can keep this on. And he was attracted to me because he would see all of these Facebook posts and all these essays that I would do while I was studying earlier on. And I said, I don't know if I can keep it on. And he didn't look at me and run away. He looked at me and said, okay, that's fine. I can understand that. So it seems like men are going to be a huge part in this from my life experience. So support your woman. If we can come back to building the system where all of those 5 necessities are adhered to, then I am more than sure that wearing the hijab is going to be a non-issue. It's just that's what it is. There's logical reasons for not wearing the hijab. So work on your systems, and you can build personal habit systems in order to do that. And the 3 categories are going to be working on yourself, it's going to be on your relationships, and working on your finances. So little by little, work on that. Get your financial freedom, get in good relationships that support your Islam, and work on yourself and your faith and your mindset and your passions and all of that stuff. And little by little, you live an Islamic way of life, and the hijab just kind of comes on. That's kind of what happened with me. And I still do fear going out in public, so this is my transitional hijab. That's what I call it. I do wear, let me take this out. So for educational purposes, when I tie it like this, I'm African. We're not going to talk about the Arabization of Islam. Usually when I go out, because I have 2 toddlers, that's how I go out in the world, in the deep south, and I'm a little scared, okay? I'm scared. So most of the time, this is how I wear the hijab when I go out and about. And then, if I'm feeling a little bit safe, like I won't be harassed, nobody coming after me, I will do this and do this. So that's how I wear my hijab. Somebody asked about a hijab tutorial, and I think this is the American style. Even back home, that's how they do it. And of course, modesty. And one of the other things is financial wealth. I remember I would wear these big sweaters when I became a hijabi. I'm like, I don't have money. I'm a college student. I'm broke. Nobody's going to finance me wearing more conservative clothes. And you can't even find conservative clothes nowadays. Oh my God, have y'all been to Walmart? Like, it's hard. And now, like with inflation and everything, the whole thing, you guys, is that it's rough out there. Have mercy. Be loving. Work on your systems. Build your personal habit systems, especially because the world ain't coming to save you, okay? It's going to be you who going to save it, okay? You are powerful, you are capable, and you can make changes in the world. So don't succumb to the system, and that's very important. Work to change it. You have the power to do so, but also at the same time, understand you live within a system, and don't question the Quran, and don't beat yourself up too much. That's the nuance, the middle path that we need to find. I studied environmental engineering and sustainability and globalization, all of that stuff. That's kind of how I got into this, and I decided to, go through every single thing. And then when I did my Islamic studies classes, it was also very critical assessment. So we talked about Sharia, policy, Quranic grammar, how to engage with the Quran. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, but this is a very rare opportunity, and that's why I am online sharing it with you. And TikTok loved it, and they said do more. So here I am doing what I'm doing, but also keeping it real, because there's so many people suffering, and that's the biggest problem. There are a lot of people suffering, people who have the system set up for them one way or another, mashallah. They are the ones who are speaking out for the rest of the Muslim community. And the biggest thing is I suffered in the system, and we about to change the system, aren't we? So inshallah, until next time, make sure to follow me on Instagram. My biggest goal is to create a leadership academy. So if you want to donate, there's also something on my website for that, as well as to follow me on TikTok. Who knows if it's going to be banned? So Instagram is where I live. This is where I share all of my information, my day-to-day challenges. I show you the realities and the struggles, the daily struggles of dealing with your nafs and waswas and all of this stuff. And more importantly, how you can get through it. Like we're capable and able, but the world doesn't tell us that we are. So inshallah, until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.